The Poppy Playtime unused content just doesn't stop coming. So not even a week after I posted my last video on Poppy Playtime Chapter 4's cut content, some more info was posted. Now at first, I thought I'd just lump it in whenever I get to making a compilation of my videos on this chapter, but I have no clue when that'll be, and this video ended up being longer than I thought it would be, so I figured I'd just make a quick part 4.5 add-on to my last video here. Of course, check out my previous videos if you haven't already for some more context, but slap that like button below, let's jump on into some more Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 Lost Bits. Alright, so for starters, one thing I mentioned in a previous video is this concept artwork of the prison cell control room drawn up by Benjamin Yim, where in the back here we noted several of the game's characters on what looks like a train map of sorts. And of these character photos here, 2 of them stood out. Now I thought that maybe these could have been early conceptual designs of Doey as well as Yarnaby, but as many of you had pointed out, this fella here is apparently a photo of a bootleg plush of Killy Willy. Now personally, I still don't really see too much of a resemblance, especially the ears, but hey, I guess I'm wrong. And then secondly, at the time of upload, no one really seemed to know who this blue fella here was. That is until a few days ago as of the making of this video, when an artist by the name of Corey revealed on Twitter that this photo here is actually of another bootleg plush, this time being designed from an old sketch of Catnap that actually predated the release of Chapter 3. Yeah, so apparently this art was made around the time the second teaser for Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 was put out, where, at the time, all we saw of Catnap was his paw in the thumbnail, as well as an obscured look at his face. And due to this, no one really knew what exactly Catnap looked like at the time, and that's evident here as this tie-wearing design appears much more like a bear than a cat. And here we also have some art for, I guess, Crafty Corn and a Chica-looking Kickin' Chicken. Now, to avoid any sort of confusion, this isn't official concept art from Mob Entertainment, so it's certainly not confirmed that Catnap was originally designed as a bear or anything. But still, I think it's pretty funny that this bootleg plush that was derived from a guess of Catnap's design ended up finding its way into this concept sketch here. Now, I ended up asking the original artist of this concept sketch to confirm 100% who these characters here are, but as of the making of this video, I haven't yet gotten a response. Now next up, as I make this video, there was actually an update to the game that changed a few things, including updating the lighting, added some voice lines from Ollie, and what I think is most striking are the additions of some new sequences for both Yarnaby's death as well as the Doctor's, which I think was a welcome addition, as these certainly make these sequences more impactful. Now, the reason I bring these up is that there was actually some content removed in Yarnaby's end, and this is the large vat of molten whatever used to be here in prior builds, and was supposed to be, I guess, what caused Yarnaby to catch fire after he got hooked. And yeah, this was removed in favor of Yarnaby dropping down into this pool of molten whatever, which causes him to burn up Terminator 2 style. And I think this certainly is an improvement over what we originally got. Now before we go on, a quick shout out to GamerSupps. Check them out for some delicious sugar-free, no-filler drinks in both their energy formula as well as caffeine-free alternative for those who don't want or can't have caffeine. Links in the description where you can grab some free samples and use code TETRA at checkout to save 10% on your order. And now secondly for this video, in part 4 we went over a bunch of early and test animations made by Malachi Breckenridge. And a few days ago, Malachi dumped a whole near 2 minutes worth of additional ones. Now, most of these are early tests of animations that did go on to be used in the final cut of this chapter, but some of these seem to reveal a few more concepts that were scrapped. Starting with the tests of animations we did end up seeing in Chapter 4, here we have Doey in his monster form running. And it looks like this animation wasn't exactly fully finished at this time, as only Doey's front 4 arms are animated. As we can see, the back 4 are just static and stretched out, and I guess whatever version of a T-pose you'd want to call this. And yeah, I just thought it looked pretty funny. Another thing that's interesting is that it looks like the internal working name for Doey in his monster form was Doey Stalker. Next up, we have an early test animation for the bit where one of the Dr. Robot fellas drops down from above after scooping up one of the batteries in the maze section there. And there's also the accompanying animation of the robot extending his hand out as he does when he rushes toward you after he drops. Next, we can get a very early look at the animation of Doey giving the protagonist a battery just before the small gear puzzle maze bit leading up to the safe haven. And here, not only is everything untextured, but we can actually also see the tris and quads of the model here too, which is pretty neat. After this, there's an early test of Doey chucking down the Dog Day toy to get the player another lever in the prison yard area in a more finished, unlit state, as well as, more interestingly, this one in an untextured blockout map. And then another fun tidbit that I don't think everyone noticed is that the pose that the toy ends up falling into is actually the Family Guy death pose from the episode where Peter Griffin keeps falling down his stairs. And this actually isn't the only instance where the devs snuck this death pose in, as towards the end of this chapter, one of the Kissy Missies can actually be found in this death pose in the safe haven after it goes boom. It's pretty hard to see if you're not specifically looking for it here, but yeah, another neat little Easter egg. And then lastly for the animations in this reel that seem to have been used, we have some for the mini Huggies. We got one section for their animation when airborne after jumping, and then another for their recovery animation after landing back down on the ground. But then, in addition to these two, as a good segue to the unused animations in this reel, there's also an unused animation of another fall recovery, as the mini Huggies can be seen doing a shoulder roll as they hit the ground. Although I hated having to deal with the mini Huggies in this chapter, not gonna lie, these animations look hella clean, and I think it's too bad that it looks like they didn't end up getting used. Then after this, there's this animation of Doey waving his hand, beckoning the player to follow him. And I don't recall this being seen anywhere, but it seems like this would have served a similar use to the few times that Doey sticks his head out into a hallway to encourage the player to follow him. Then also for the Dough Man, we have this untextured test animation for him in his monster form taunting by slamming the ground with his two front hands. Now this animation is still actually left in the game as a Taunt 1, and there's also a Taunt 2 that appears to be used whenever you break free from Doey's grasp as he tries to pull you in. As such, it's possible and likely that this first taunt could have been used in a similar manner. And just like we saw with the running animation test earlier, when loading this animation onto Doey in the game, we can again see the back arms just static and extended. And while we're talking about Doey's model here, I didn't mention this in my previous videos, but there are actually two unused models of the fella left over in the game referred to as proxies. Now, proxy models are basically simplified models used as a placeholder when developing a game, and as such, it should come as no surprise that these are untextured and different compared to the final model. First, we got one just referred to as a proxy rig, and it's obviously quite basic with only 6 main arms and another 6 coming out of the mouth here, and we got 3 basic spheres representing Doey's inner heads. And what I thought was extra funny is that despite being a basic model, they still bothered to model Doey's hat here. The same can't be said for the next model with a PRX at the end of its file name. I'm assuming short for proxy again, and yeah, here, despite being more detailed, this one is hatless. And in addition to just being a bigger model, this fella has a whopping 15 extended hands on his main body, which is actually 5 more than the final model, and honestly, the more hands Doey has, the creepier I think he gets. But yeah, just figured these were worth mentioning as I missed them for my previous videos. Anyways, back to the animations here. Next, we have a pair of unused protagonist death animations. First is one that's a bit more basic as it just has the player getting knocked down to the ground. And then the second one has the player dying on a meat hook in a death sequence that seems to have been completely scrapped, as there's no hook on which the player can die in the final version of this chapter. So yeah, it's unclear where this would have fit in, as the player would seemingly get raised up after getting hooked like this, but the only plausible section I can think of is the Yarnaby death sequence, where perhaps if you messed something up, the protagonist would end up getting hooked instead. But that's not really a meat hook, so I guess if it was in fact supposed to be meat related, I suppose only the kitchen area leading up to the safe haven would have fit that bill. Now, I asked Malachi on Twitter for some more clarification for this animation, but just like with the concept art earlier, still waiting to hear back. But whatever the case may be, although the jump scare animations are neat, I think death animations like these would have been cool to see in this chapter too. And then last but not least for this Reels animations, it wraps up with showing an animation titled Crispy Critters. And yeah, it's just about exactly what it sounds like. Here we get to see 4 of the smiling critters get electrocuted, resulting in them getting cooked beyond well done, as they start to smoke a bit too. Now there's only one section in the game where a smiling critter gets zapped, and it's in this section after the bit with Baba Chops. But even there, after getting zapped, the Simon Smoke doesn't get smoked, at least not nearly like this. So I'm assuming these animations here were tests of the critters getting zapped in this chamber thing, and yeah, I think seeing a critter get toasted like this would have made zapping this fella here that much more visceral. Anyways, we'll actually be wrapping it up here for Chapter 4, at least for now. If anything else noteworthy gets dumped online, you can look forward to seeing it covered as bonus content at the tail end of when I make a compilation of all these videos I made on this chapter. Till then though, check out my other videos, and be sure to subscribe to find your way back here in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for popping by today, and I will see you in a bit.